Ethan Parker's days often blurred into one another, filled with the monotony of meetings and reports at the advertising firm where he worked. Life in the suburbs of Dallas had become a routine of quiet stability with his wife, Rachel. They had been married for 8 years, building a comfortable life in their cozy home. Ethan thought they were happy, even if the spark of their early years had dimmed into something calmer, more predictable. It was a Sunday afternoon when Ethan first noticed the peculiar charge on their bank statement. Courier services, premium delivery, for $120. Ethan frowned, trying to recall any package Rachel might have mentioned. "Hey, Rach," he called out, holding his phone. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of iced tea. "Did we order something special last month? There's this charge for premium delivery." Rachel glanced at him, her face momentarily tightening before she smiled. "Oh, that? Yeah, I ordered some skincare products from this boutique. They required a specialized delivery service because it's temperature sensitive." Ethan nodded slowly, still feeling a niggle of unease. Rachel had always been meticulous about her purchases, and $120 for delivery seemed excessive. But he shrugged it off. After all, people splurge sometimes, don't they? Yet the thought lingered. Later that night, as Rachel scrolled through her phone in bed, Ethan decided to check their doorbell camera archives out of curiosity. He wanted to see this mysterious delivery. He scrolled back through the feed to the approximate date Rachel mentioned. And there it was, a courier van pulling into their driveway. A tall, athletic man in his late 20s stepped out, carrying a medium-sized package. Ethan watched as Rachel opened the door, dressed casually in a fitted tank top and leggings. They exchanged words, though no audio was available. What caught Ethan's eye was the man lingering longer than usual, gesturing with his hands animatedly as Rachel laughed. Eventually, she waved him inside. Ethan sat back, his heart skipping a beat. Rachel rarely let strangers into their house, especially delivery drivers. Maybe she offered him a glass of water, Ethan thought, trying to rationalize it. He checked the next few minutes of footage. The door stayed closed for nearly 20 minutes before the man walked out, looking over his shoulder briefly as if to check something. "Strange," Ethan muttered. He didn't mention it to Rachel. Not yet. The unease festered over the next few days. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the courier stepping into their home. Why had Rachel never mentioned it? Deciding he needed more context, Ethan went back to the doorbell camera archives. He scrolled further and further back, noticing small, seemingly innocent patterns. The same courier van had been parked in their driveway 3 other times in the past 3 months. This wasn't just a single, temperature-sensitive delivery. Ethan felt a cold wave of doubt wash over him. Instead of confronting Rachel outright, he decided to ask a subtle question over dinner. "You know, Rach," he began casually, swirling his glass of wine, "we've had the same delivery guy a few times lately. Seems unusual, don't they rotate routes or something?" Rachel's fork froze mid-air for the briefest moment before she resumed eating. "Oh, yeah, I think they do. He must have just gotten our area again. Weird coincidence, huh?" Ethan nodded, but her answer felt rehearsed. The following day, he called the courier company under the guise of tracking a package. After providing a few fake details, he asked about the delivery driver for their address. "Oh, that's Kyle Bennett," the dispatcher said. "He's been on that route for about 3 months now." Ethan's stomach churned. Kyle Bennett. The name hung in the air, heavy with implications. That evening, Ethan couldn't resist delving deeper. He transferred the footage from the doorbell camera to his laptop, meticulously cataloging each of Kyle Bennett's visits. The footage was circumstantial at best, but it painted a troubling picture. Each visit lasted between 15 and 30 minutes, longer than any typical delivery. One clip from 2 months ago caught his attention. Kyle arrived at the house while Ethan was at work, and Rachel greeted him at the door. This time, she stepped out onto the porch, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. They stood close, too close, laughing and chatting like old friends. Kyle's hand brushed her arm as they exchanged something, not the usual transactional stiffness of a customer and courier, but a lingering, almost intimate familiarity. Ethan's heart pounded. He felt sick, his mind racing with possibilities. Was it just friendly banter? Or was there something more sinister beneath the surface? He decided to save the clips onto an external drive for safekeeping. He needed time to process this, to decide how to confront Rachel, if at all. Ethan's opportunity for confrontation came sooner than he anticipated. The following weekend, Rachel left the house to visit her sister, claiming she'd be gone for the entire afternoon. Shortly after she left, Ethan noticed an envelope slid under their front door. Inside was a single photograph of Rachel and Kyle sitting together in a cafe, laughing over coffee. There was no note, no sender information. Just the picture. Ethan felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. The image was recent. Rachel was wearing a sweater she had bought just weeks ago. His hands shook as he stared at the photo, the evidence of her betrayal now undeniable. But who had sent it? And why? As Ethan grappled with his discovery, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You deserve to know the truth. There's more." Ethan's hands trembled as he read the cryptic text. He didn't recognize the number, and the lack of a name only deepened his suspicion. After taking a deep breath, he replied. "Who is this? What truth?" The response came quickly. "Meet me at Riverside Coffee on Main Street tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll show you." Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. It felt like stepping into a trap, but his curiosity, and anger, overwhelmed any sense of caution. He needed answers, and whoever this was seemed to have them. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on a young woman sitting alone in the corner, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked up, met his eyes, and waved him over. "You're Ethan, right?" she asked as he approached. Her voice was low but firm. "Yes." "And you are?" he replied, sitting down cautiously. "My name's Lindsay," she said. "Kyle's ex-girlfriend." Ethan's jaw tightened. Lindsay continued, her expression cold. "I found out about Rachel when I went through Kyle's phone a couple of weeks ago. I knew he was cheating, but I didn't know who with, until I saw her picture in his messages. He even had videos of them together." Ethan's stomach churned. "Videos," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Lindsay nodded, sliding a flash drive across the table. "I copied them before I dumped him. You deserve to know the truth." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. He stared at the flash drive as though it were a live grenade. "Why are you helping me?" he finally asked. "Because I want him to pay," she said simply. "And because no one deserves to be in the dark about something like this." Ethan slipped the drive into his pocket, muttered a tense thank you, and left. The weight of what he might find was already pressing down on him. Ethan sat alone in his office that evening, the house eerily quiet. Rachel was upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her. With a deep breath, he plugged the flash drive into his laptop. What he saw made his blood run cold. The folder contained several videos and screenshots of texts exchanged between Rachel and Kyle. The texts were explicit, dripping with flirtation and innuendo. In one video, Rachel could be seen letting Kyle into their home, greeting him with a kiss far too passionate for a mere acquaintance. Ethan's hands clenched into fists as he scrolled through the evidence. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the dates he'd seen Kyle's van in their driveway. One video, labeled "Special Delivery," showed Rachel leading Kyle into their living room, laughing as she handed him a drink. The clip cut off moments later, but the implication was clear. Ethan felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a fleeting indiscretion, it was a full-blown affair. His mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Did she ever feel guilty? Was she laughing at him behind his back? For hours, he sat in his chair, staring at the screen, the weight of betrayal crushing him. By the time he closed his laptop, a plan had begun to form in his mind. The next evening, Ethan suggested they have dinner together, just the two of them. Rachel smiled, seeming genuinely pleased by the idea. She had no idea what was coming. Over steak and wine, Ethan tried to act normal, though his stomach churned with suppressed anger. Finally, as they finished eating, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her. "Rach, do you remember that delivery guy?" "Kyle?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Yeah, I think so." "Why?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I was just curious. You seem to know him pretty well. Let him inside the house a few times." Rachel's face paled, her fork clattering onto her plate. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I'm talking about this," he said, pulling out his laptop and opening the videos Lindsay had given him. He played one of the clips, watching as Rachel's expression morphed from confusion to horror. "Ethan, she started, but he cut her off. "Don't," he snapped, his voice cold. "I've seen enough. I know everything, Rachel. The texts, the videos, everything. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just planning to keep lying until I figured it out on my own?" Rachel buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she choked out. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Ethan stared at her, his anger boiling over. "That's the best you've got? It wasn't supposed to happen? You invited him into our home, Rachel. You let him into our life. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Rachel reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Ethan, please," she begged. "It's over. I ended it weeks ago. It was a mistake, just a stupid, terrible mistake." But Ethan wasn't listening. His mind was already focused on what came next. Ethan's rage burned not as a flash but as a slow, deliberate fire. He decided that both Rachel and Kyle would feel the full weight of their betrayal, not in a violent, reckless way, but through the destruction of the lives they had selfishly enjoyed at his expense. Target 1, Kyle. Ethan's first step was to ensure that Kyle Bennett faced tangible consequences for his actions. Using the evidence provided by Lindsay, Ethan compiled a detailed report of Kyle's unprofessional conduct. He included screenshots of explicit texts and videos that clearly showed Kyle engaging in inappropriate behavior during work hours and on company property. The damning package was sent anonymously to the courier company's headquarters with a simple note. "Your employee, Kyle Bennett, has been engaging in misconduct with clients while on the clock. This is unacceptable for someone representing your company." Within days, Kyle was summoned by his employer for a meeting. Ethan later learned through Lindsay that Kyle was fired on the spot. His glowing reputation within the courier industry was in shambles, and word of his disgrace spread quickly. Local companies that once praised his efficiency now refused to hire him. But Ethan wasn't done. Knowing Kyle's finances were precarious, Ethan filed a civil suit against him for trespassing and emotional distress, citing the affair's direct impact on his marriage and mental health. The suit forced Kyle to pay for a lawyer, draining what little savings he had left. Though the case was eventually dismissed, the financial burden left Kyle reeling. Target 2, Rachel. Ethan turned his focus to Rachel. He knew exposing her betrayal required careful planning. He didn't want an emotional outburst, he wanted precision. After consulting with his lawyer, Ethan filed for divorce, using the evidence of her infidelity as leverage. Texas laws regarding infidelity can influence divorce settlements, and Ethan intended to take full advantage. During their divorce proceedings, Ethan played the videos and shared the texts in court. The judge, visibly disgusted, sided with Ethan, awarding him full ownership of their home. Rachel was forced to move into a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The court also ruled that she could not claim alimony due to the affair, leaving her to fend for herself financially. Public exposure. Ethan knew that social humiliation could cut deeper than any financial loss. He decided to let the truth be known to their circle of friends and family, but subtly, to maintain his dignity. At a small gathering with mutual friends, Ethan casually mentioned the divorce, ensuring he was calm and composed. When asked why, he simply said, "Rachel was seeing someone else. I found out through our doorbell camera." The room fell silent. Whispers spread quickly, and before the night was over, nearly everyone in their social group knew the sordid details. Rachel found herself ostracized, her phone blowing up with accusatory messages from former friends. Even her parents, who had adored Ethan, were furious. "How could you throw away your marriage for some delivery boy?" her mother yelled during one tense phone call. The shame and disappointment from her own family crushed Rachel, leaving her isolated. Psychological warfare. Ethan wasn't content with mere exposure, he wanted Rachel to feel the depth of her betrayal every day. To remind her of what she'd lost, he replaced the family photos in their home with solo portraits of himself and the dog, Bella. Whenever Rachel came to collect her remaining belongings, the house radiated with her absence. He also made subtle but cutting gestures, such as mailing her copies of the video clips labeled Memories, and sending her flowers with a note that read, "Congratulations on destroying everything." The cruelty wasn't loud, but it was sharp and precise, eating away at her already fragile emotional state. Months after the divorce, Ethan arranged for Lindsay to accidentally bump into Rachel at a coffee shop. Lindsay, who still harbored her own grudge against Kyle, didn't hold back. She approached Rachel and delivered a chilling line, "You thought you could get away with it? I made sure Ethan knew everything. He deserves better, and so do I." The encounter left Rachel in tears. She fled the cafe, humiliated and broken, realizing that her actions had cost her not only her marriage but also her reputation and future. For Ethan, the revenge wasn't just about retribution, it was about reclaiming his life. He sold the house and moved to a sleek apartment downtown, a symbol of his fresh start. He joined a fitness class, traveled to places he had always wanted to visit, and eventually began dating again, though cautiously. Rachel, on the other hand, sank into a spiral of regret and loneliness. The life she had once taken for granted was now a series of painful reminders of her mistakes. She watched from afar as Ethan flourished, knowing she was the architect of her own suffering. In the end, Ethan had not only destroyed the lives of those who betrayed him but also built a stronger, brighter future for himself.